Good morning and welcome back to Pimlico Racecourse, home of the Preakness. Speaking of the Preakness, it's a couple hours away. Gabby Gaudette joined by Acacia Courtney as the excitement starts to build. And Acacia, it was a little bit on the warmer side yesterday, and unfortunately it was kind of like American Pharoah Preakness a couple years ago, where we just had this rainstorm come in right before the Black-Eyed Susan. But it was a fantastic day, fantastic handle and attendance. And we're going to top that today.
I'm sure we will. Record-setting handle and attendance yesterday, and I think you and I got our cardio in yesterday afternoon running through. But the sun came back yesterday afternoon. It's a very comfortable weather today. Should be great for the horses, great for the fans watching as well, great for the infield fest. So really excited for today's races. 14 races on tap, of course, highlighted by the Preakness. We'll see if Always Streaming gets it done or if he will be upset today.
It's great horse weather. They love this type of weather. It's a little breezy. We'll get to the track and weather conditions momentarily, but of course the Black-Eyed Susan taken by a maiden yesterday. You don't see that very often, but congratulations to the connections, Mr. Service, and obviously Nick Juarez. Must have been an incredible experience for especially Nick.
I'm sure, and I saw a great photo afterwards of Nick draped in the garland with his dad on site too, so congratulations. Excellent training job by the Service barn. I remember seeing that horse at Gulfstream and Restricted Stakes Company. She finished second. She came back, and she showed up when it counted yesterday against tough Black-Eyed Susan Company.
And, of course, the Pimlico Special won by Shaman Ghost, your heavy favorite there. But a Jimmy Jerkins exacta with Dolphus running underneath of him. So congratulations to all the winners yesterday. We're going to dive into the action today. Of course, first post set for 10:30. Now we've got that super high five carryover today, just over $3,000. That does take place in every race of 7 or more betting interest. Moving along to the Rainbow Six, that does start in the 6th race. We've got a carryover of $31,000. That is a 20-cent base wager. I like the sequence today. And we wanted to mention all of our guarantees to look forward to. Saturday wager guarantees. We've got that middle pick 4. Don't miss that middle pick 4. It's races 6 through 9. That is a $500,000 guarantee. In the late pick 5, we've got a $1 million guarantee. That does kick off in the 9th race with the Maryland Sprint Stakes and caps off with the Preakness Stakes. The late pick 4 is races 10 through 13. That is a $2 million guarantee. That starts with the Gallarette Stakes, includes the Sir Barton, the Dixie, and the Preakness. So plenty of wagering opportunities today. And now we'll take a look at your track and weather conditions. As we mentioned, it's a little bit on the cooler side. Perfect horse weather. Now, we did have some showers around the Black-Eyed Susan time yesterday. We also had it around the last race and a couple more showers this morning. So you can see the main track and the turf is listed good and good. But Acacia, this turf course just dries out so quickly, and we're expected to have beautiful weather on tap today. So just imagine, or I would predict that it's going to dry out pretty quickly. 10:30 a.m. first post for 14 races on tap. So we'll get straight to it. What we're going to do for a timing standpoint, we're going to kind of breeze through the first 4 races. Just wanted to quickly mention that the first race does start this 2 other than allowance optional claimer. It's a very competitive race, but wanted to mention some of those multi-race bets. So the pick 5, the early pick 5 does not start in the first race. It starts in the 2nd race. The early pick 4 does start in the 3rd race too. So some really good races in there, but for, like I said, a timing standpoint, we're going to kick off with the stakes action. But do take note, early pick 5, race 2, early pick 4, race 3. We'll start things off with the very one. Acacia, we go out to the turf course at 5 furlongs. Start us off. How do you see this race?
Well, I think that this is an interesting race because you do have some rematches going on, and I wanted a horse that's coming outside of those horses. Obviously, Pretty Perfection, everything lovely, and the scratched Night Delight. They've faced each other before. I did land on, as I said, a fresh face, and that's a horse coming off a layoff as well. The 6th Animal Appeal for trainer Jeremiah Englehart. We have a stat here. Over the past 5 years, 180-plus day layoff on the turf. Now, 4 for 19, which means 21% win, 53% of the time in the money, an ROI of more than $3, $3.24. Now, he's only ever done this once in a non-graded stakes, and he won. That was with the Teacup. So he's had success with this kind of layoff, and he has Jose Ortiz in the saddle. Plenty of natural natural speed for this mare.
And she's got the back class to kind of build on. I know plenty of times she's faced restricted New York bred company, but in the Smart and Fancy at Saratoga, that was a very good field, as we've seen what Fairpoint has gone on to do, even Miss Ella keeping pretty good form. So Animal Appeal, she's got that pace factor, she's got the class factor, but we'll take a look back to a race at Gulfstream that several horses come out of. Now, we're highlighting Night Delight and Everything Lovely and Pretty Perfection, but do take note, Night Delight is scratched today, so really do focus on Pretty Perfection and Everything Lovely. And coming out of the gate, we can obviously see them really positioned everywhere. The thing that I like about Pretty Perfection, Acacia, is that she just finds herself in the right spot. I actually picked Night Delight because I thought that she had a sneaky treble trip. We can see Everything Lovely. She is the number 12 horse. She gets out to the front end, and she looked excellent going into this race. She positioned herself well. She just could not sustain her speed and hold off the late run from Pretty Perfection. And I kind of went against Pretty Perfection a couple of times, but and I know she comes out of a subpar effort last time out, but that was against Lady Aurelia, so go figure. She always works out her own trip, and that's exactly what you want out of a 5 furlong turf sprinter.
You absolutely do, and you can see she's just finishing with really good energy in that race at Gulfstream. And as you said, she was against Lady Aurelia last time. She was also incredibly wide at Keeneland. That was going 5.5 furlongs there too. She's going to get a slight turn back to the 5 furlongs, which really is her distance. She's 5 for 10 in the win column at this distance, and she won 3 races in a row before she had that blemish on her form last time out. So she's absolutely one to respect. And tactically speaking, if there is a lot of speed up front, Animal Appeal has speed. We did see one major pace setter scratch in Night Delight for sure, but probably some speed to the inside with Everything Lovely as well. That could set up perfectly once again for Pretty Perfection. She just keeps getting these good trips, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it again. Like I said, I just wanted a new face.
And even Ela, she is a filly that's very fast. If you go back to a race on the 24th of February, I can remember handicapping the race and thinking that there was going to be a contended duel on the front end, and really Scuba Sue got out to the front end and just led the field on a merry chase, and she unfortunately was kind of grinding down the stretch and just couldn't quite catch her. After that, they got back to sending her out of the gate. She went wire to wire, so I would imagine that she's going to show speed, and I like the outside post position she gets. I also like Johnny Velasquez in the saddle, so Ela I think might be worthy of throwing into some exotics at a price. And we also have Sunny Sammy, who obviously is forwardly placed. She wasn't last time out in the Turf Amazon back in September, but she stumbled coming out of the gate, so it's going to be a very interesting race from a pace dynamic. And isn't it always the case at a 5 furlong sprint?
Yes, it is, and it seems like sometimes it's just a scramble where either everybody goes or nobody does. So that'll be interesting, too, in those first couple of races before we get into the stakes, see how the track might be playing after some of that moisture, and it really could be a bit of a scramble up front in that 5 furlong sprint.
Very competitive, the very one. As we turn the page to the 6th race, of course, this does kick off that middle pick 4. We've got a $500,000 guarantee in the middle pick 4, races 6 through 9. We started off with a starter allowance, 7,500 starter allowance, a 1 1/16 onto the turf, and we did have some key scratches in terms of the pace scenario, because Boppin' and Weavin' is out, figured to be part of the pace. Katornix figured to take a little bit of money. That horse is out, and Palladian. Now, the 15 Barney Rebel does draw in off the also eligible, so did you factor that into your middle pick 4?
I used a few horses from coverage to start things off, just using 2. I did not factor in that also eligible coming in the outside. I still thought it could go between the 1 and the 3 because I wanted to spread in that 7th race as we get a little bit more into the sequence. That's the Chick Lang. I think there's several strong horses in there, and maybe it is a little clear cut that I'm looking at, but I am going to use Jose Seaview and my Giant. I actually really liked Boppin' and Weavin' in here to start things off, but I'll just use 2, hoping that gets me off the ground. Then 4 in the 7th, 3 and 3, $36 for the middle pick 4. Really fun sequence, I think.
It is, and an affordable ticket there to build that bankroll as the pick 5 starts in race 9 too. So looking forward to that. Once again, a 1 1/16 on the turf. The scratch of the 2 Boppin' and Weavin', I did think kind of changes the pace scenario, but I still think to be a pretty contended pace. We've got the 4 Wildcat Pleasures who's stretching out from sprint distances. We have Here's Johnny, who finds himself pretty forwardly placed. We've got some other speed types to keep the pace honest up front. So that's why I like 2 closers. 1, 2, hopefully. We've got the 1, Jose Seaview, who I thought that this was a very specific claim for Bruno Tessori. I have a feeling he was reading the condition book and dove in and claimed this horse, who was a runaway winner. Really good energy last time out, first off the claim.
Really did. He closed wide, and then he ended up pulling away from the rest of the field. Now, there was a little bit of a collapse of the pace up front, so it did set up for him, but I thought not only did he take advantage of that, but he continued on with really nice follow-through, and that's what I liked about it. And he had switched back to the turf right off the claim. He had found the mud prior to that, and he actually ran okay. He was in okay form, but just really explosive and seeming to find where his home is on the grass once again, going that mile and a 16th distance last time.
Winner last out on the turf for Bruno Tessori. He's batting at about 30%, 47% in the money too. So it is a negative ROI because we've seen down in Florida his horses get bet, but I think you won't. I think he'll fly under the radar a little bit here because Bruno Tessori is kind of a new name here in Maryland. The 11, I'm the Big Man. I really like him given the same factor. I think the pace will probably be contended on the front end, and I'm the Big Man to with his closing run. And he always likes Pimlico. Sometimes he runs some of his better races here. So I'm using him at a big price to beef up the exacta. You prefer the 3 in here, My Giant, who has some back turf races that are really good. He just hasn't seen it in quite some time.
He does, and that's what I'm going off of. I'm hoping that it's kind of a similar situation to Jose Seaview, where he switched back to the grass and he was like, yay, I've missed this. This is awesome. So I hope that that's the case. Now, dirt to turf going distance of ground for Jason Egan is not the most productive move. He's actually only had a couple finish in the money with that kind of stat in the past few years. But I do think that he has some tactical ability, pace-wise, looking at how this race might set up. It could still be a contested pace, and he could sit right behind that and be in the catbird seat.
I saw it the same way, Acacia. We'll get back into the stakes action with race 7, the Maker's Mark. Chick Lang, 6 furlongs on the main track for these 3-year-olds, and we have our good friend 3 Rules coming back, but cutting back in distance, and of course the heavy favorite in here, the 7, Recruiting Ready. Now we'll go back to Recruiting Ready's last race at Laurel. Now this was on the 10th of March when he was facing Liar's Dice and also Always a Suspect. Now this was a very interesting race because it looked like Recruiting Ready was home free. We could see him under Horacio Caramanos just with a mitt full ready to explode at the quarter pole, but Liar's Dice actually really gave him a run for the money coming down the stretch. I wasn't crazy about the performance from Always a Suspect, and maybe his performance was heightened by an off track last time out. There were some scary moments here coming down the stretch and this horse was going to get beat.
Yes, I agree with you. And it's interesting. I did land on Always a Suspect on top, even though I didn't like that performance from him either. I thought it was actually kind of disappointing, even though he finished 4th and he did take some money at the windows. Now, Recruiting Ready, I looked up some stats for the barn. Winners last time out on the dirt. It's just 1 for 10 in the past 5 years, and it was with this horse. He now won 2 in a row. So he could certainly be the exception, not the rule. But here's a stat for Always a Suspect and Kieran McLaughlin on the dirt with winners last time out in non-graded stakes. He wins at 33% clip, 65% in the money, and still a positive ROI of 247. I think there's no denying that Kieran does an excellent job in placing horses where they can be successful. And that race last time out, yes, he did win by 8 lengths, and you kind of wonder, was it heightened by the off track? He had success on the mud before at Belmont. He's run on the inner. Where is he comfortable, and what is his form? And that's why I thought maybe he would be one with all those questions that might go off at a little bit of a better price.
That's an excellent stat and a good stat to show because this is what Kieran McLaughlin is very good at. And if you're trying to be Recruiting Ready, I do think that he is a main foe. Now, Recruiting Ready, he's been a little bit of a project throughout his career. They've obviously wanted to stretch him out in distance for quite some time. They put the blinkers on, they took the blinkers off, then they put him back on. I can remember talking to Horacio de Paz before his comeback race in the Buffalo Man, saying that after Gary Stevens rode him, Gary Stevens suggested maybe putting a shortcut blinker back on him to get him to settle a little bit more. So it looks like it helped. He's just one that definitely needed the cut back in distance. He won going away in the Bachelor Stakes at Oaklawn last time out, but I didn't think it was that strong of a field. That said, we've got Always a Suspect in here, and we also have 3 Rules. But 3 Rules is going to have to work out a trip from the rail post as he figures to want the lead, and I think Recruiting Ready's not going to let him take a deep breath.
No, he's not. And that's another reason I liked Always a Suspect. I thought he could take advantage of any sort of pace that happens up in front of him. I think with the rail post position, too, and the cutback in distance with his natural running style, 3 Rules has to send. And I remember talking to trainer Jose Pinchin down in Florida before the Florida Derby, and he said, look, you're only 3 once. We want to take a shot on the Derby trail, but if worse comes to worse, we know we can sprint. And he's always felt that this horse is a little bit stronger sprinting. So I'm not surprised to see this. I still kind of think his best distance is around 7/8, but he does look like this is a better spot for him.
I agree. He might be, in the long run, he might be a really good 7 for a long, maybe 1-turn miler, just because he can maybe use his speed a little bit better and more efficiently. But that's a very good race there in the Maker's Mark Chick Lang as we turn the page to the Jimmy Murphy. I love this race each and every year. I don't know why. I think it's because I picked like a 20-to-1 shot maybe last year, 2 years ago.
That's a good reason.
They're all blending together. But these are excellent races to go back to sometimes the 2-year-old form that might resurface for these 3-year-olds getting back to the turf. Now, we are going the mile on the turf course, and we'll start things off with Dover Cliffs, a horse that you and I are very familiar with as he had all 3 of his races in South Florida, most recently winning the Cutler Bay. He was bumped a little bit entering the first turn, but other than that, Acacia, I thought he got a pretty good trip. Beyond him, I just wonder the strength of the field in the Cutler Bay in hindsight, because Gemologister finished second. We also saw Shiraz in there, but Shiraz actually has come back to run some decent races against New York Bred Company in the low 80 Beyer speed figures. I think he's one to respect, but I'm not fully confident on him.
And that's fair. I wouldn't single him in those multi-race wagers, though I did put him on top. And here's a couple reasons why I do like him. I thought that day in particular was just really heavily favoring speed types, and I thought that he was one of the only ones making up significant ground in that race. And just physically watching him in Florida, he really has continued to progress. And I remember speaking to Christoph and saying that he was very high on him and thinking that he could have a good future ahead of him. So I think he's moving in the right direction, which is what I like about him. Now, he'll probably take money off of, on paper, winning a stake last time and Jose Ortiz staying in the saddle. His breeding, of course, he's kin to a couple of graded stakes winners, but I do think that he's just moving in the right direction, and he did really show that he could close last time. You had that 80-to-1 shot and Gemologister setting the pace. It looks like he might run away with it.
And exactly, and you bring up a good point, because Gemologister, yes, he did finish second, but this turf was kind to speed. That's why I'm kind of wishy-washy about the Cutler Bay, but really he hasn't done anything wrong. I mean, he showed up every time in the afternoon. From what I can remember, though, first time out, he was a very leggy, kind of nervous type of colt. And then, as you said, as he started to race, it looked like the light bulb started to click and he started to figure things out. So you have to respect him. But we've got a new shooter in Yoshida, and we'll go back to his last performance at Keeneland. This was on the 9th of April, going against Maiden Special Weight Company. And wow, this horse was rolling. You can see the opening quarter fractions were 22 2/5 of a second. He was going very fast, going a mile and an eighth. That's going a mile and an eighth. And kept on with a pretty even clip, and ears pricked, continued to run away from the field. This was a pretty impressive performance.
Wow was a good word for it. And he also came off of a 5-month layoff. They added the Lasix for the first time, and it looked like everything just really came together. Now, that was an explosive performance, and we really don't know who Yoshida is yet. We don't know what to expect from him in here, but we do have a stat to show on trainer Bill Mott on the turf with maiden winners last time out, second off the layoff. He wins at 29% and 59% in the money. It is a 471 ROI because there was a 22-to-1 shot in there that obviously paid quite a bit, so that bumps the ROI up quite a bit. But I did think that those were some strong percentages, and Belmont knows how to get a horse ready.
And this horse ran very impressively first time out and second time out, and we always see that trainer Belmont sometimes takes a more patient approach in developing maidens, so that's something to take note of. He looks like a pretty special horse, and I think a main foe for the favorite in here, Dover Cliffs. That said, I'm going in a completely different direction with the One Mo Maverick, because I loved his last race, and this is what George Weaver's really good at, kind of developing horses from their 2-year-old season, coming back at 3. He had one horse, I can't remember his I'll think about it for the later show. But it was a perfect example of a George Weaver trainee. But Mo Maverick, if you go back to his last race, it looked like he was stalking on the backstretch. And then when he was asked, he absolutely exploded away from the field. We see the third place finisher, Avis Mesa, came back to just be beaten 3/4 of a length at Keeneland and an A other than. I think he got into the low 80 Beyer speed figure range. So that was actually a productive race. And a lot of the time, if you look at stats for George Weaver horses coming off layoffs, they're not great. It's usually better second off the layoff. So the way he ran first off the layoff, I think he's going to improve. And if he does improve, he could win.
And it's definitely encouraging, and he's shown that he can run well fresh before. From September to November, he came back, he tried the turf, he broke his maiden by 7 lengths, so he's certainly one to respect. I do also like the number 10, Adonis Creed. They added the blinkers last time. Now, this is a horse that's had trouble staying straight in the lane a bit. We saw him down at Gulfstream. When he ran in the Grade 3 Palm Beach, they actually added cheek pieces to him. They got rid of the cheek pieces, put the full blinkers on last time at Keeneland in that allowance race, and that really did seem to help, and he showed a lot more speed last time too.
I loved him first time blinkers on. That's exactly what he needed to try to keep that straight course. So Adonis Creed, that's why I love the Jimmy Murphy, just because it's such a competitive race each and every year, and there's money to be made in that. We'll turn the page to the 9th race. This is the 31st running of the Maryland Sprint, 6 furlongs on the main track. Of course, this does kick off the pick 5. We'll show you, well, first, the guaranteed. We do have a $1 million guaranteed pool for that late pick 5, races 9 through 13. That does include the Maryland Sprint Stakes, the Gallarette, the Sir Barton, the Dixie, and the Preakness. So now let's get to my ticket. I took a little bit more of an expensive approach because we do have that $1 million guarantee, but I did have a cheaper ticket for $60, but this is going to do it for me. I'm going to be using the 4-5 as we start things off with AP Indian and Whitmore, 4 horses in the next race, 4 horses in the 12th race, which is the Dixie, and then as we move along to the 13th race, we get to the, I think that's a wrong order. Yeah, that starts in the 9th race. So 9, same order, just different races, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, no 14. 4-5 is in the Preakness Stakes with Classic Empire and Always Dreaming. So same numbers, just different race order there for that $80 ticket. But we do start it off with the Maryland Sprint, and I do think, Acacia, that it goes between 2 horses, an AP Indian and Whitmore. We'll start with AP Indian, who, of course, ran in the Breeders' Cup Sprint 2 starts back. His comeback race was in the Commonwealth last time out. So we'll show you that replay from Keeneland, where we saw Awesome Slew wind up winning this race. And he made an impressive middle move. We pick it up here. He was just stalking so comfortably on the outside, and he makes this impressive middle move, and then eventually Acacia just kind of flattens out, only to be run down by Awesome Slew. But this was still a good race, I thought, for the comeback, considering what he was going against and considering how Awesome Slew and Limousine Liberal both came out to run huge in the Grade 2 Churchill at 7 furlongs on Derby Day.
They did. Limousine Liberal getting a 101 Beyer speed figure, winning the Churchill. And this is the horse to beat on paper for sure. He was sensational this summer at Saratoga, winning the Phoenix at Keeneland in the fall. And even 2 starts back in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, he was running against Mind Your Biscuits, who went over to win in Dubai, and Dreyfong, who was just a horse that's been in exceptional form lately. Now, for Arnaud Delacour, second off the layoff in dirt sprints, he is just 3 for 17, and it is a negative ROI. It's not something that he does, but this horse, he's 5 for 8 at this distance. He is a pure dirt sprinter. This is where he's comfortable, and he's had so much success now. Second off the bench, he certainly could move forward. I just did have my reservations, and I just think Whitmore is a horse that is coming in hot.
He is, and they finally cut him back in distance, and it seemed to be successful. Poor Ron Moquette has all these horses that just need turnbacks, and they wind up just running like this, like Whitmore did last time out at Oaklawn. He blazed by the field at 50 cents to the dollar. Now, he did get an appropriate setup. We saw Holy Boss kind of do the dirty work on the front end, setting that hot pace, setting it up for Whitmore. But you can just see this horse's energy coming down the stretch. He was the easy winner. I'm just handicapping this race and thinking that AP Indian is coming out of stronger fields. That said, Whitmore, he's got the momentum of 4 very impressive races under his belt.
And that's fair. And that's where you do kind of sit back and wonder how this race is going to play out. Is it going to be the horse whose class really does prevail in the type of horses that he's been running against, or the one that's just found his home since they had that turn back in distance and he came off of the layoff? He's been unstoppable. So I certainly do respect both of them. I also respected the speed of Holy Boss. I think that he might he will have some speed probably to the rail from Lakai to deal with as well, but I thought that he could be an awesome banner to the outside as well, but I did think he could be able to hold on for a share.
Well, I think you and I both agree it's probably between those 3, probably between just 2. Would love to see a stretch duel between AP Indian and Whitmore.
That'd be awesome.
That would be amazing. We'll turn the page to the 10th race. We wouldn't leave enough time to really dive into the Preakness Stakes. We get to the grade 3 Gallaret at 1 1/16 on the turf course. This, of course, kicks off the late pick 4. We have a $2 million guarantee in the late pick 4 that starts in race 10. And Acacia will just dive right into your ticket here. Walk us through the sequence.
All right. Well, I'm going to be hinging off the final leg of the sequence. I'm going to single Always Dreaming. And I really thought about making this ticket a little bit more expensive because I think you can, because you have that great guarantee and it could be worth it. I'm thinking the 11th race is where you try to find your value. But I've been high on Always Dreaming since his allowance race at Gulfstream, actually, and I said I have to just keep sticking with my gut, and if Classic Empire beats me, then that will be it for my pick 4 ticket. Of course, Classic Empire, the most worthy foe in there, but using 4 horses in here to start things off in the Gallaret, it's a competitive rendition, as are all the stakes today. Using 5 horses in the Sir Barton, I'm trying to pick against Hedge Fund, but I think, again, that's where your value could come into play. The Longines Dixie is 1 16th on the turf, and the 12 using 3 in there. I do really like Projected on top, and then singling Always Dreaming in the Preakness.
All right, $30, a nice affordable ticket. And I will give you full credit. You have liked Always Dreaming from the get-go, and I've always been on the opposite side of that. We've kind of been battling opinions, and you're winning, obviously, as he did just recently win the Kentucky Derby. So, but we'll see what happens in the Preakness today.
Today's a new day. You never know.
Today is a new day. We'll get to the Gallaret, Acacia, and we'll start off with the 3 Danny Lovna. This is a horse who came back off of a little bit of a freshening, or pretty decent layoff, actually, to run in and win the Dahlia. And I can remember the turf was pretty soft that day. You can see it's listed as yielding, kind of slower fractions there. And I was talking to Graham Motion prior to the race, and I asked him, do you think that she'll like the yielding going? Because she's tried it before. She tried it in the Winter Memories at Aqueduct. Didn't seem like her cup of tea. And he said, honestly, that was surprising to him given her European form. He always thought that she would like it, and she showed her true colors here.
And she did, and she certainly had a couple of questions, as she did win on the all-weather track in Europe. She did not win on the turf in there, though she did have a couple of races on good turf with some give in it in Europe, and she didn't run poorly. Now, last time out, you could kind of see that the pace setter, Catch a Rising Star, just took a right turn, and as Ron Nicoletti would say, yeah, exactly, as Ron Nicoletti would say, went to the popcorn stand. So Danny Lovna kind of inherited the lead in there. But that being said, it did turn out to be a strong race. It produced 2 next out winners. I thought she was running against some tough competition, and we have a stat on Graham Motion as well, of course, with a stakes win yesterday. This is over the past 5 years, second off the layoff on the turf, graded stakes winner last time out. It's a specific stat, but it's 28% win, 64% in the money. More than $4 ROI, $4.63, and I think if you get any sort of price on Graham Motion with this horse, she's moving in the right direction.
I completely agree with you. Danny Lovna, one to use, but the 7 Elysia's World is coming out of 2 very, very good races, and I think she is one that's continuing to improve, and Chad Brown actually already has 3 wins in the Gallaret. He's won this with What's the Chances, Pianist, and Zagora. So he's looking for his 4th victory in the Gallaret. And when you get an older, turf division stakes race, you always know Chad Brown is going to be well represented. Now, she unfortunately has been caught behind Dickinson, who seems to be blossoming at the right time right now. Dickinson, of course, a recent winner of the Grade 1, Jenny Wiley. And you look at her race last time out, and it just looked like she was given too much to do, whereas Dickinson, Paco Lopez did a brilliant job in placing Dickinson a little bit closer to the pace where she didn't have too much to do. I'm hoping she can sit a little bit closer to the pace, not too close because you don't want to take her out of her comfort zone. She was just left with a little too much to do.
I agree with you. And if you look at her win at Gulfstream when she came off of a freshening, this was back at the end of December, she did sit a bit closer to the pace that day. She was obviously not facing the same caliber of company that she has in her last couple of starts behind Dickinson. But I did think that that was perhaps tactically a little bit stronger performance from her. And she seems to be a horse that is actually moving in the right direction because she had kind of foundered a little bit against Graded Stakes Company back in the summer, with her only win being the very first one in the U.S. and the first one with Chad Brown. But those races and her last 2 starts really proved that she could be competitive against top-class horses.
The 6 on leave, kind of a questionable performance in the QE Cup last time out. Didn't really find an excuse, but I will say Shug McGahee does a fantastic job kind of freshening his 3-year-olds to come back in their 4-year-old season. Actually, I did find a specific stat, we won't show it, but with these types of layoffs with his 4-year-olds going a distance of ground on the turf, he's 32%. It's an even ROI out of 25 horses, so he's done this frequently with success. We'll get to the 11th race, the Sir Barton, a mile and a 16th on the main track. I thought that this was a very tough race, and you and I both agree because we both think that Hedge Fund is vulnerable, but we'll show you the Illinois Derby where he finished a good second behind Multiplier. And to me, Acacia, analyzing this race, I thought that Hedge Fund really got the perfect ride. We saw the pace setter in front of him. The pace setter was stopping. I thought the rider made a good delayed move into that pace. It wasn't like he plopped into that pace that fell apart in front of him. Just think he was second best.
I do too, and of course we'll see Multiplier later on today in the Preakness. And Hedge Fund has some speed for sure. He's skinned to Stanford, who we know is very speedy on the front end as well. And it was a tight photo finish, but I certainly did think that Multiplier was just closing much stronger in here. And his 3rd place finish in the Sunland Derby 2 starts back where he was behind Henst and Conquest Mo Money. Of course he's going to take money today behind the horses that he's been finishing with, but I just thought that that was an okay race from him. He did break his maiden. Did break his maiden by 4 lengths, but again, I just kind of wonder. Is he going to be a short price favorite that's going to be very vulnerable today? And that's why I did look elsewhere, as did you. Now, I landed to the outside with the 9 Time to Travel, a horse that I've kind of been chasing a little bit. Broke his maiden very impressively, wiring the field. Now, he is the full brother. It's a hard not to like, who, of course, was Turf, but he's proved himself, and he moved to the Michael Matz barn last time out. He was up close, but he didn't get the lead, and I think he might be a need-the-lead type to be most successful. They do add Lasix and John Velasquez today.
I think that is a good horse to use. I'm curious to see what Honor the Fleet does. You talk about Time to Travel probably needing the lead, and I think there's really no other option but for Honor the Fleet to go. Maybe you could get a stalking trip, but when you have the rail post position and you're on a speedy horse, why not take the initiative and get your position going into the first turn? So we could see that happening. Of course, Louis Albatrani, good to see him back with a very impressive horse. Of course, he trained the Breeders' Cup Sprint champion Artax, but I was doubting him a little bit last time out, and it's not to say he didn't beat the strongest of fields by any means, but when you see a lightly raced horse draw off from the field like that by almost 8 lengths, you know that he's got some talent. So I'm just hoping that's the tactic that they employ. So both thinking that Hedge Fund is vulnerable, finding alternatives there. You land on Time to Travel. I land on Honor the Fleet. We'll get to the Grade 2 Longines Dixie, a mile and a 16th onto the turf course. And we have, this is a very good race, but we'll start with the 2 World Approval, as he is a Grade 1 winner, going back to his Grade 1 victory in the United Nations. And this might help him today. We obviously have to keep tabs on how the turf is playing and what the conditions are as we get along today. We don't expect any precipitation, but this is a horse who actually really likes a little bit of give in the ground. So if that's the case, it might enhance him. And a lot of people might think he might want longer, as he has had a lot of experiences going a mile and a half, a mile and a quarter, a mile and 3/8, of course, in the United Nations. But he actually has gotten a little bit quicker in the afternoons, and that wasn't really the case when he used to be running a mile and a 16th. So I think he's going to get sit just off the speed today in world approval. I do like him best, but I do think that this is a race you want to have some coverage in.
I think you do too. And talking about the distance, he has a good record here. He's 2 for 4 and with the third. So he hasn't really done anything wrong in regards to this distance yet, though he has just been running longer lately. Now, he came off of about a 6-month layoff, had a win at Tampa going 9 furlongs. They'll turn him back slightly. And he does have a little bit more speed than he used to. So that's certainly fair. I alluded to projected earlier, and I'm landing on him. He's now third off the bench. I remember seeing him at Gulfstream off the layoff in the Canadian turf and talking to Chad, and he was saying, thinking that he's going to actually need a race. I'm looking forward to a couple of races down the row, and then he came back with an impressive nose victory over Divisidero, who that poor horse had a nightmare trip in that race and just got nipped at the wire. He, of course, did come back to win the Grade 1 Woodford Turf Classic. We also saw the third-place finisher come back to win as well. So I think projected coming out of an exceptionally strong race, and he's moving in the right direction off of the layoff. He has a lot of back form in Europe, racing in France, and we know that Chad, as you said, you see a turf race in the afternoon going a distance of ground, you know that he's going to have some strong contenders.
And projected, he was up against it from a pace scenario in the Canadian turf, just because heart to heart, when he gets to his own devices on the front end, there's really no catching him. He's a horse that loves Gulfstream too. He also looked a little bit green. I can remember in the post parade, he was kind of shying away from the pony a little bit. So it looks like with experience in the United States, he's going to improve. Now, I'm going to throw in a long shot before we move on to the Preakness. The 3 top of mind. Use this horse in your exotics. I love him today. Last time out, he was way too far off of the pace to have any success. And he is usually, he's a closer for sure, but he actually was stifled, blocked a little bit at the quarter pole, and he had to kind of go wide around everybody. And if you see him in the split last second of the screen, he comes with a huge late run. So expect big things from top of mind at a big price. But we have horses like Black Type in here. We have horses like Ring Weekend, the old class horse, easy horse to root for. That is a competitive race. But I wanted to spend more time on, of course, our headliner of the day, the Grade 1 142nd running of the Preakness Stakes. We'll dive right into this with showing the Kentucky Derby. And I'll tee you up with saying, or asking you, what did you think of this race, and who do you want out of it other than Always Dreaming? Actually, analyze Always Dreaming's race first. We'll
okay, so we'll look at Always Dreaming, and of course we can see the number 5, Always Dreaming. He had a perfect post position that day. You can see. All right, go ahead. You
well,
have something
Classic
to say.
Empire just
yeah,
gets
the
annihilated.
worst trip ever.
Yeah, totally. And we can see Irish War Cry come over and just completely create a cluster immediately coming out of the gate, taking Classic Empire out of his element, well back from off the pace. You can see just a line of dirt that's going into his face, whereas we see Always Dreaming get into position on the rail, close to the pace, really in the clear. Now, I've heard people go back and forth. Always Dreaming, there was supposedly a little bit of a bias during Oaks Day and Kentucky Derby Day, where you wanted to be closer to the pace and you wanted to be close to the rail. That's exactly what we saw from both Looking at Lee and Always Dreaming. That said, Always Dreaming was part of a very fast pace. State of Honor was part of that pace, who finished last, and he went on to finish with good energy. So you can look at it either way, negatively or positively.
I think you can too. And that was what I was about to say as well, that Always Dreaming really on paper and just looking at the way the track was playing, he had the ideal setup. Now, it seemed that that was the way that you wanted it to be on Oaks Day as well, and yet we saw Abel Tasman come from last to first and win the Kentucky Oaks when there was that hot pace.
That was a crazy
which
hot
was
pace,
insane.
Though.
No, it was
that was
insane.
the exception.
That was the exception. The horses killed each other on the front end. That being said, it wasn't the same way in the Kentucky Derby, but Always Dreaming did pull away from the rest of the field, which was what I liked about it. Now, Classic Empire had a nightmare trip, and he still managed to get fourth, and I certainly respect that. Now, he hasn't been the easiest horse to figure out, that is for sure, but looking at the way that he's stepped forward since this race from the Holy Bull where he was hot, he kind of refused to load at first. He just was very distracted, looking all over the place, and then he came back to win the Arkansas Derby, and he was able to really show his class in that race and get that Grade 1 win going into the Kentucky Derby. That trouble trip, we obviously heard that he had some issues with his eye as well, getting bumped. Irish Wardcry, that was where the break in the gate was as well. So that's where trip handicapping really does come into play. Do you think Classic Empire was really stifled so much in that race?
It's all about opinions. It's all about opinions.
It is.
And who's right. But Classic Empire, obviously, he did have a very trouble trip coming out of the gate and at the top of the lane, too, at the quarter pole. Really, I thought, though, with his, it could... If he's a closer and he gets bumped out of the gate, yes, it's bad. But he's a horse that wants to be more tactically positioned, closer to the pace in that stalking position. So for me, I think Conquest Mo Money is going to have to send from the outside. I think Cloud Computing is going to be forwardly placed. And we're going to see perhaps Classic Empire and Always Dreaming in a similar position going into the first turn. Beyond that, we have all closers in here. So I'm kind of leaning towards horses that have that tactical speed. Cloud Computing is going to be my new shooter. I thought he ran a really good race in the Gotham. He was close to that hot pace that J-Boys Echo, the winner, did benefit from. Gunnevera, Acacia, quick thoughts on Gunnevera. We have to wrap here. But Gunnevera, I had a dream last night that he won.
Oh, okay. Well, you better tell that to Antonio Sano. I'm sure he'd like to hear that. The biggest reason I like Classic Empire, I agree with you on the tactical speed angle. Gunnevera is one-run closer. He's got Mike Smith up today, and I've just been watching him training. He's put on weight since the Kentucky Derby. Physically, he looks like he's coming in strong.
He does. He looked fantastic. First day on the track here, just really positive energy, something that he doesn't always show because he's kind of a lethargic horse. But good stuff from you, Acacia. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in for our brief synopsis of the Preakness Day card. This is the late pick 5, the corrected ticket. Again, that's races 9 through 13. We have a $1 million guarantee, $80. You can find all of this at pimlico.com. We'll be tweeting throughout the day as well. Thank you again for joining us this morning, and best of luck on today's 14 race Preakness program. Good luck.